Metroid Zero Mission was released on the Game Boy Advance in 2004, 2 years after the extremely linear Metroid Fusion. It was also the only Metroid remake for 13 years until we got Samus Returns on the 3DS. If you only played the game once, or you were a dumb kid like me, you probably considered the game pretty linear. I mean, what could you do with the game literally showing you the exact map tile it wants you to go to all the time? Much like Super Metroid, however, if you know the advanced movement options of the game, you can bust your way into just about anywhere in the map after leaving Brinstar. Not just that, but Nintendo placed all sorts of destructible blocks that serve no purpose other than to shatter the sequence of the game. Before we get into how non-linear this game is, let's establish the intended order of item collection. You start by getting the Morph Ball, then the Long Beam, missiles, Charge Beam, and bombs. Then you go to Norfair to scoop the first unknown item, the Power Grip, and the Ice Beam before going back to Brinstar for Kraid's Lair, which has the second unknown item and the Speed Booster. After that, you go back to Norfair for the High Jump just to turn around for the Various Suit, then to turn around back to Norfair for the Wave Beam, Super Missiles, and the last unknown item. After standing still and killing Ridley, you get the Screw Attack and go to Torian. There's also the Chozodia content, but by that point the only thing to get is Power Bombs, which are close to the final boss. As you can tell, it's a lot of back and forth for a pretty short game. On repeat playthroughs, it can be annoying, but I think it works well. The game, without words, tells players that there are always going to be new discoveries in past areas if you go back with new gear. It also empowers the player when they can return to an early game area, traverse it with ease, and get a big reward to boot, like the Various Suit. But this is a Metroidvania. The intended order is nice and all, but this is about customizing your experience to whatever makes you happy. So how exactly can you upend the intended order? Zero Mission uses most of the Metroid classics of bomb jumping, single wall jumping, and shine sparking, plus its own unique method of heavily hidden, breakable blocks. These blocks were so out of the way that the only way you'd likely find them is by backtracking with power bombs and using them on every screen. They didn't uncover pickups, but hidden routes designed specifically to speed up repeat playthroughs. Although I imagine most people found out about these spots from watching speedruns like I did. Some of these spots are really tame, like the blocks that let you skip the Long Beam. Even I knew about that one as a kid. But then they upped the ante with this missile block in Norfair. But more on that later. Now that we've touched on what you can do to sequence break, let's get specific with it. This won't be an exhaustive list, but we're going to look at an array of sequence breaks and put them into two categories. The first is Time Saver, and the second is Sends a Message. Time Savers has some practical use, while breaks that send a message are not optimal, but just prove that it can be done. The first skip of the game is only a few doors away from the start, and that's Long Beam Skip. You don't need it to beat the game, but you'll be relying on missiles to damage anything outside of basically punching distance. Thankfully, the beam isn't as important in this game as it is in other games, so it's manageable. Skipping the Long Beam also means you don't have to mess with everything above it, including a Chozo statue telling you to get bombs. This is definitely a time saver. The Charge Beam was added to the game along with this additional mini-boss, the directly named Charge Beam Beast. This boss shows up right after you collect the missiles, and it's faster to kill it than wait for it to leave. Don't kill it here, it'll bounce between these two locations, meaning you'll have to encounter it 3 times minimum. Even though the Long Beam is skipped in the speedrun, the Charge Beam is obtained because it allows the use of the pseudo screw attack, which is helpful for maneuvering through enemies without slowing down to dodge them. As a skippable item, it's definitely in the Sends a Message category. After getting bombs, you can actually go straight for the Various Suit, but it's not exactly fun. Without the Power Grip or Ice Beam, you'll be totally reliant on bomb jumping to get there. It's doable, but not very worth it. If you get the Various Suit now, it'll appear in all cutscenes, and when you get the High Jump, you'll be able to go immediately for Ridley's Lair. But considering you can skip all that with a different method, it's a bit of a moot point unless you don't want to fight Ridley before Kraid. Early Varia is going in the Sends a Message category. In Criteria, you have to collect both the unknown item and the Power Grip. You cannot explore the majority of Norfair without the Power Grip, and you need the unknown item to get the Power Grip. This means the next sequence break is right after the Ice Beam, another required item. Right before you leave the Ice Beam's jungle gym, well, for one thing, you can skip this Chozo statue with a well-placed bomb to save some time. But look at this innocuous room. If you missile right here, it leads to a vertical shaft that falls way past what you would normally see on your first visit to Norfair. It puts you right at the start of the hallway leading to Ridley's lair. All you have to do is beat the ensnared Kiru and enter the lair to skip even more content. When playing normally, you're supposed to leave and follow the Kiru's path so you can fight the Imago and get supers, but that takes time. so we're going to avoid that. In the room to the right of the elevator, all you have to do is bomb jump here to enter Ridley's lair from the back. Just follow the path and get super missiles here. Then the only thing to get in the lair is the third unknown item, which is required to make Ridley spawn. That was a lot of content, so what did we just skip over? After getting the ice beam, the game wants you to go to Kraid's lair, but we're delaying that. The intended way to get to Ridley's lair is by messing with all this right here, but we're ignoring it. If you did explore there, then you would need the various suit and high jump, and you would get the wave beam. Then in Ridley's lair, we skipped Imago. Between getting the various suit and skipping it all together, it's faster to skip it, so it's a time save. Same with the wave beam. It's nice to have, but you'll rarely miss shooting through walls, so it's also a time saver. Then there's the high jump, which is actually faster to get. It's not necessary to beat the game, but the increased jump height is great to have and makes fighting the Kirugiru much faster, meaning skipping the high jump boots sends a message. Lastly, we have Imago Skip, and considering you can get super missiles without backtracking and doing a boss fight, it's definitely a time saver. Ultimately, early Ridley's lair as a whole is a time saver. Also, those super missiles I mentioned, they're technically optional. There are no required super missile doors in the game. I have no idea why you would want to skip them, but you can if you want. Considering how much they speed up boss fights, this is probably the sends a message item skip. Leaving Ridley's lair presents us with yet another skip. If you went to Ridley's lair first, you'll have no choice but to do this, but if you fought Kraid first, then you can choose. You need the speed booster to get the screw attack, but Zero Mission doesn't like telling you what to do, so you can take this launcher to the right here to leave peacefully. Skipping the screw attack is boring, but it saves time, so it's a time saver. Our next skip is all the way in Kraid's lair. This one isn't about skipping an item, but an event. You're intended to fight the acid worm and activate the zipline so you can get to Kraid, but there's a skip for this too. There's only one zipline you have to take, and it's right at the entrance to Kraid. If you're precise, you can navigate this using well-placed bombs to clear the gap. Then you're a hop, skip, and an unknown item away from Kraid. Acid worm skip is another time saver. It's also the only skip that I didn't do myself, so I inserted some video from a speedrun. If you have super missiles, you can kill Kraid in seconds and move on. It doesn't feel like it, but the speed booster is also a skippable item. Compared to other items that we've skipped, it's needed in multiple locations, including the escape sequence. However, you don't actually need it to leave Kraid's lair. The spot in Norfair that needs it is totally skipped if you take the hidden shaft, and you can escape after beating Mother Brain by using bomb jumping instead, which will not leave you with much time to spare in hard mode, but it's doable. One caveat to skipping speed booster is that you cannot also skip Acid Worm, because without the zipline you need to shine spark in this room in order to leave, which is fine because getting the speed booster is definitely faster than skipping it. So let's put it in the sends a message category. Torian is straightforward and so is Chozodia. Kind of. There's nothing to get in Chozodia's stealth section, but there are several points where you can skip parts of the ship by shooting specific tiles. I don't know how people discovered these, but they feel pretty great to use. There's a spot in the room before the docked ships, and the spot before you cross the tube, that skip a fair bit of the stealth sequence if you know how to wall jump up a single wall. These, like the shaft to Ridley's lair, stick out to me as very unnecessary additions that make replays more interesting, since you can save time and look good doing it. Stealth shortcuts are absolutely time savers. Once you have your fully powered suit, you can ascend to Mecha Ridley. Right before it, though, are some power bomb blocks. And you could get the power bombs since they're so close, but that takes time. So we're going to instead go up this passage and ignore the last item of the game. Not having the power bombs is annoying, but it's technically optimal. So this is a time saver. This leaves us with 7 time-saving skips and 5 skips that send a message. This is not an exhaustive list of everything that's possible, but highlights the major ones that are useful and or fun to do. So what does this mean you should collect? Speaking only for the major items, this means you'll manually collect the Morph Ball, Missiles, Charge Beam, Bombs, Power Grip, Ice Beam, High Jump Boots, Super Missiles, Speed Booster, and the 3 unknown items, which add up to 12 pickups, not including whatever E-Tanks and missiles you get. Ultimately, you skip grabbing the Long Beam, the Varia Suit, the Wave Beam, the Screw Attack, and Power Bombs, which is less than it feels like when you ignore so much of the game. Also keep in mind, I'm not telling you that this is the definitive list of items to get and ignore. Do whatever you want. If you want to get the Long Beam and Screw Attack but skip the supers, then go for it. It's your game and play it however you want. One more thing that's interesting about all of this is all of the end cards that Zero Mission has. There are 8 in total. Like Fusion, this game also rewards you with special end cards for beating the game with 100% item collection. But what's different here is there's also a special end card for beating the game with 15% item collection or less. This isn't something the series has done again, which is probably for the best, but you can still impose the challenge on yourself in other titles. I like that the game rewards you for minimizing what you get and has enough wiggle room to allow you to express yourself in what you collect. Unlike Metroid Fusion, major items count towards your completion total, so getting the Morph Ball counts towards your precious 15 items. The list of items you have to collect are the Morph Ball, 1 missile tank, bombs, power grip, ice beam, barrier suit, a super missile tank, and all 3 unknown items, which is 10%. What you may have noticed is I included the Varia suit here, but just encourage skipping the Varia suit. So what does that mean? Well, for some reason, when you get the fully powered suit, the game gives you the Varia suit for free, even taking the item away from the Chozo holding it if you go back to look, even though you never picked it up. So you can save the time it takes to get the Varia suit, but you'll get it regardless in the late game. Also, you can technically get a second missile pack instead of supers, but I don't recommend it. This leaves you with 5% to choose what to fill with, assuming you don't want to do a true low percent run. You can collect E-tanks, more supers, or maybe pick up a movement option you like, such as Speed Booster. One thing you need to constantly be aware of, regardless of your choice, is ammunition. You're constantly going to need more missiles. You could get the charge beam, but without the long beam, it's hard to use on bosses, and without collecting even more beams, then the damage it deals won't keep up with the Ridley fight. Then the last 2 bosses, Other Brain and Mecha Ridley, are totally immune to the charge beam, so you have to use missiles anyway. Luckily, every boss has some way of farming missile refills, so you're never stuck, but the danger comes from staying alive for these long boss fights with low health. You'll need to be vigilant for a while to make sure you can kill the boss before you lose your own very limited health. This problem is greatly exacerbated in hard mode since everything does double damage and E-tanks are half as effective, which means investing in health is a losing battle, but you should probably pick up some so you're not doing a no-hit run. Hard mode also reduces how much you get from each missile, super missile, and power bomb pickup, so not only do you have to dodge more, but you have to refill on ammunition in boss fights way more often. This also means you need to pick up more missiles, which eats into your wiggle room for keeping yourself at 15% item collection. Zero Mission is an easy game, but I really like this challenge as a way of making the game actually hard, and would recommend it to anybody who wants to try beating Zero Mission in a new way. Zero Mission manages to walk the line of granting the player perfect clarity on where to go in a big world, but just below the surface manages to create a nexus of personal choice and challenge that shatters the preconceived notion of how the world should be experienced based off of a single playthrough. Even though Zero Mission does force you to collect certain items, it's hardly restricting, and with enough dedication, you can do damn near anything. This contrasts very well with Fusion's perfect linearity. I don't have a problem with that linearity, mind you. Fusion sets out to tell a story and it did so very well. But the series needed this return to form, and I'm glad we have it. If it's been a while since you've played Zero Mission, then hopefully this video can spur you to give it another go. And if you've never played this game and watched the whole video anyway, play it yourself with the intended sequence before breaking it so you can appreciate the stellar level design and isolated and dynamic atmosphere of the game. Zero Mission is far from a hidden gem, but compared to the most popular Metroidvanias, it feels like it takes a bit of a back seat. How Metroid Zero Mission approaches sequence breaking is unique in its own series, rivaled only by Metroid Dread, in how it encourages you to find sequence breaks. Thank you for listening to me show off a game that I've consistently enjoyed for 20 years now, and don't forget to subscribe.